Zyra Vale laughed the moment she saw her. "This is the wife," she said, stepping into the living room. "You've got to be joking." She looked Marable up and down, slow, deliberate, cruel. "So this is who you're afraid of," Zyra added, glancing at Julius. "She looks like she'd apologize for breathing." A sharp breath escaped near the doorway. Zyra stepped closer. "You should thank me," she said. "At least now you know why he leaves." No one spoke. Marable didn't move. She stood there in cream silk and gold, hands relaxed, eyes steady. One man shifted his weight. Another stepped away from Zyra. Marable looked at her, not with fear, not with anger, but with the calm certainty of someone who already knew how this would end. Zyra mistook the silence for weakness. And that was the moment everyone else understood. "She shouldn't have said that." "Before we continue, tell me where you're watching from. Subscribe and stay with the story." Marable K. Holt had learned long ago that truth rarely arrives as a confession. It comes in fragments, missed calls, altered schedules, conversations that stop when you enter a room. She noticed the change in Julius before there was proof, the way he showered twice a day, the way his phone never rested on the table anymore, the way his laughter sounded rehearsed. She said nothing, she watched. People spoke around her freely, assuming her calm was ignorance. They were wrong. Marable lived quietly on purpose, South American by birth, careful by design. To the outside world, she was a reserved wife who handled logistics for overseas clients. To the men who mattered, she was something else entirely, someone whose silence meant decisions were being weighed. Still, she believed in order, in giving people a chance to correct themselves. One evening, after their daughter had gone to sleep, Marable asked Julius a single question. Her voice was level, controlled. "Are you seeing someone else?" Julius froze, then erupted. He shouted, he accused her of disrespect, told her to mind her place, told her he was the man of the house. His words cut sharp and careless, fueled by the confidence of someone who believed he was untouchable. "And even if I was," he sneered, stepping closer, "what would you do about it?" Marable didn't answer. She didn't argue, didn't cry, didn't defend herself. She simply looked at him, long enough for his anger to burn itself out. Julius took her silence as surrender. That night, Marable sat alone in the dark, hands folded, listening to the house breathe. By morning, she had made her decision. The first warning would not come from her. And when it did, no one would know it was mercy. Julius Holt left the house the next morning like nothing had happened. He kissed their daughter's forehead, grabbed his keys, told Marable he'd be late. The ease of it settled something cold in her chest, not anger, not sadness, but certainty. He believed the conversation was over. He believed his shouting had ended it. By afternoon, the letter was already written. Marable didn't sign it. She never signed anything that mattered. The paper was plain, the handwriting careful, almost old-fashioned, no threats, no emotion, just information, names, places, times, proof that someone had been watching long enough to know Zyra Vale's life better than she realized. The man who delivered it was not threatening either. Middle-aged, ordinary. He waited until Zyra stepped out of a cafe she visited twice a week, handed her the envelope, and walked away without saying a word. Zyra read it once, then again. Her smile didn't fade, it sharpened. That evening, she waved the letter in front of Julius like a joke. He barely skimmed it before laughing. "You see," he said, "this is what I deal with, silence, then drama." He told her his wife was quiet, foreign, too soft to do anything real. He said the letter was a bluff, a desperate attempt to scare her away. "She doesn't have the courage," he said, "or the connections." Zyra believed him. She wanted to. That night, Marable received a single message from a number she recognized without saving. One word. "Delivered." She deleted it immediately. Outside, the city moved on. Cars passed. Lights changed. Somewhere, Zyra Vale folded the letter and decided it didn't apply to her. And in the quiet space Marable had created, the first warning settled into the world, unacknowledged, unrespected, and already running out of time. Zyra Vale had grown up believing rules bent for people like her. Her last name opened doors. Her father's voice ended conversations. She learned early that consequences were negotiable if your bloodline was loud enough. By the time she met Julius Holt, she was already practiced at getting what she wanted and keeping it. Julius fit neatly into her life, polished, attentive, hungry. He spoke about ambition the way men do when they want to sound powerful without fully being it yet. He never talked about his home, never mentioned his wife unless pressed. And when he did, he spoke of Marable as if she were a shadow, present, but irrelevant. Zyra liked that. The letter didn't scare her, it offended her. The idea that someone thought they could warn her felt insulting. She showed it to friends, laughed about it, called it jealous wife nonsense. When Julius reassured her, she leaned into the comfort of his certainty. "She's quiet," he told her again. "She won't do anything." Zyra repeated those words later, alone in her apartment, like a spell. Still, something shifted. She began noticing small things, cars parked too long, familiar places suddenly uncomfortable. She dismissed the feeling quickly. Paranoia was for people without protection. Her father's name had always been enough. When she mentioned the unease to Julius, he brushed it off with ease, took her out, bought her something expensive, promised her a future that didn't include anyone else. "You're safe," he said. "I wouldn't put you in danger." Zyra chose to believe him. That night she slept well for the first time in days, convinced the letter was the worst it would get. She had no idea the silence afterward wasn't retreat. It was preparation. The letter stayed on Zyra's kitchen counter longer than she liked to admit. She told herself it was trash, something beneath her. Still, she reread it in the quiet moments when the city outside went still, when even confidence needed reassurance. The words were calm, precise. There was no begging in them, no anger, just a request framed like advice. "End it, walk away. This is your only notice." What unsettled her wasn't the message. It was the accuracy. The places listed, the times, details she had never shared with Julius. Someone knew her routine better than she did. That should have frightened her. Instead, it irritated her. Zyra hated being told what to do. She tore the letter once, then stopped, folded it neatly, and slipped it into her bag. Proof, she decided, something to laugh about later. Marable spent that same afternoon exactly where she was supposed to be, on calls, reviewing documents, listening more than she spoke. No raised voices, no sudden moves. The people around her noticed nothing unusual, which was precisely the point. Warnings only work when they're quiet. By evening, Zyra had convinced herself the situation was simple. A jealous wife, a weak one, the kind who writes letters instead of acting. Julius confirmed it without realizing how much damage he was doing. "She's trying to scare you," he said. "That's all she has." Zyra nodded, satisfied. Across the city, Marable closed her laptop and looked at the time. She didn't check her phone. She already knew the warning had been ignored. That changed the rules. Because warnings were never about obedience. They were about consent. And Zyra Vale had just refused it. Julius Holt mistook calm for weakness because it made his life easier. After the letter, he became careless, stayed out longer, lied less convincingly. He spoke about Marable with a confidence that bordered on cruelty, telling Zyra that his wife had always been this way, quiet, compliant, content to exist in the background. He framed her restraint as inability, her silence as fear. "What's she going to do?" he said once, smiling. "Send another letter." Zyra laughed with him. She needed to believe that. At home, Julius moved like a man unchallenged. He spoke louder, claimed more space. When Marable passed him in the hallway, he didn't look at her. He assumed the matter was settled, that her silence meant acceptance. Marable observed everything. She noticed how Julius began taking calls in the garage, how he stopped asking permission for anything, how he no longer hid his arrogance. She didn't interrupt, she didn't correct him. Silence was more useful than argument. That same week, she made 2 phone calls. No names were spoken, no instructions needed explanation, just confirmations, availability, timing. The people she contacted did not ask why. Zyra, meanwhile, felt invincible again. The tension faded, the unease dulled. She began planning further ahead, imagining Julius untethered, imagining herself replacing someone she had never truly seen. She didn't notice the shift around her, how familiar faces stopped smiling, how one opportunity quietly disappeared, how the city felt slightly colder. Julius told her she was imagining things. "She's bluffing," he said, "trust me." Marable folded clean laundry that night, hands steady, expression unchanged. The first warning had been ignored. The second would not be written. The second warning didn't arrive on paper. It arrived while Zyra was seated at an outdoor restaurant she liked because people watched her there. Politicians passed through, executives, faces that mattered. She felt protected in places like that. 2 women took the empty seats at her table without asking. They were not dressed alike, but there was a sameness to them, posture, stillness, the way their eyes scanned the space once and then settled. One of them placed her phone on the table, screen down. The other smiled politely. "Ms. Vale," the woman on the left said, calm, controlled. "We won't take much of your time." Zara stiffened, but didn't stand. She refused to give them that satisfaction. "We are here because a message was misunderstood," the second woman continued. "That happens, this is clarification." They spoke softly, no threats, no raised voices. They didn't mention Marable's name. They didn't have to. They told Zyra what she already knew. This situation had been seen, measured, and allowed longer than it should have been. "This is the last time," the first woman said. "Step away." Zyra laughed. She leaned back in her chair and finally looked around, making sure people could see her. Then she looked directly at them. "You picked the wrong person," she said. "My father doesn't take warnings, and neither do I." The women didn't argue. They stood when the conversation was over, not when Zyra dismissed them. As they left, one of them paused just long enough to say something quietly. "This was mercy." Zyra scoffed once they were gone. Across the city, Marable received confirmation before Zyra finished her meal. She didn't sigh. She didn't react. She simply crossed one option off her list. And waited. Zyra told the story that night like a victory. She exaggerated the women's politeness, mocked their restraint, laughed at the idea that anyone thought they could scare her. Julius listened, half amused, half uncomfortable, but he didn't stop her. He nodded in the right places. He reinforced the lie she needed. "They wouldn't dare," he said, "not with your father." That name again, the shield she trusted, the one Julius leaned on without understanding how fragile borrowed protection could be. Zyra repeated the encounter to friends, framing it as proof that she mattered, that someone felt threatened enough to send messengers instead of confronting her directly. In her mind, it confirmed what she already believed. The wife was weak, hiding behind others, incapable of acting on her own. She didn't notice the shift afterward. The way a long-standing contact delayed returning her call, the way a meeting she'd been promised suddenly required review, the way a familiar security presence outside one venue quietly disappeared. Each change was small, easy to explain away. Together, they formed a pattern she refused to see. Marable spent those same days doing very little that could be noticed. She attended her daughter's school meeting. She signed off on shipments. She listened. She allowed people to think nothing was happening. The most dangerous movements, she knew, were the ones that felt like absence. Julius grew more reckless, mistaking the lack of confrontation for freedom. He spoke openly now, careless with words, careless with loyalty. Zaira felt emboldened. So emboldened that, one evening, she made a decision without consulting anyone. She wanted to see the wife for herself. And when she followed Julius that night, she didn't know she was walking toward the only place she had never been allowed to imagine. The call came late, when Zaira was alone and least patient for lectures. Her father didn't waste time. He never did when rumors reached him before facts. He asked where she was, who she was with. Then he said Julius Holt's name once, slowly, like he was weighing it. End it, he told her. No anger, just certainty. You're too visible for this. Zaira bristled. She accused him of overreacting, of listening to gossip. She said Julius was different, that he understood her, that love was worth discomfort. Her father let her speak without interruption, which should have worried her more than shouting ever could. When she finished, he lowered his voice. Some people don't leave fingerprints, he said. They leave space, and when that space appears around you, it's already too late. Zaira dismissed it. She said her name carried weight. She said no one would touch her. She said the wife was nothing, quiet, foreign, invisible. Her father went silent. I warned you, he said finally. That's all I can do. The call ended without goodbye. Zaira stared at the dark screen longer than she meant to. For a moment, just a moment, unease crept back in. Then Julius called, cheerful, reassuring, telling her he'd see her soon. The comfort of his voice drowned out the warning she didn't want to hear. Across town, Maribel watched her daughter sleep and thought of nothing else. When people warned her, she listened. Zaira had just proven she would not. Zaira didn't plan to follow Julius. It happened the way reckless decisions often do, quietly, without drama, wrapped in the belief that curiosity was harmless. He left her place later than usual, distracted, checking his mirrors too often. Zaira noticed. She slipped into her car a minute later and kept enough distance to feel clever about it. They drove through parts of the city she didn't frequent, streets that grew quieter, cleaner, houses spaced farther apart. No neon, no noise. Julius didn't slow down until he turned into a gated property Zaira had never heard him mention. Her stomach tightened. This wasn't an apartment. This wasn't temporary. This was permanent. She parked down the street and watched as the gate closed behind his car. Lights came on inside the house one by one, measured and deliberate. Zaira waited, counting seconds, telling herself she was proving something. When the gate opened again, she didn't hesitate. She walked up the driveway like she belonged there. Inside, the house was still, expensive without being showy, the kind of place designed to last, not impress. Voices echoed faintly from deeper within, men's voices, low, controlled. Then she saw her. Maribel stood in the living room, composed, distant, wearing cream silk like it was armor. She didn't look surprised. She didn't look angry. She looked prepared. Zaira felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, hesitation. It lasted less than a second. She straightened her shoulders, stepped fully into the room, and let her voice rise. Confidence rushed back in. Mistaken confidence. And with it, the decision that would end everything. The first thing Zaira noticed was the silence. Not the comfortable kind, the deliberate kind, the kind that forms when people stop what they're doing because something irreversible has entered the room. Conversations died mid-breath. A glass was set down too carefully. Somewhere behind her, a door closed, softly but final. Maribel didn't rush forward. She didn't step back. She stood exactly where she was, near the wide windows, hands relaxed, posture effortless. Her expression held no surprise, as if Zaira's arrival had already been accounted for. Zaira scanned the room quickly. Men lined the perimeter, well-dressed, alert, watching without staring. None of them looked at Julius for guidance. That detail registered, but pride shoved it aside. So, Zaira said, forcing a laugh, "This is where you've been hiding." Julius tried to speak. The sound never made it out. Marable finally turned her head fully towards Zyra. Their eyes met for the first time. There was no hostility there, no challenge, just recognition. Zyra felt something slip, balance maybe. She recovered fast. I expected more, she continued, stepping farther in, heels sharp against stone. All that secrecy, and this is it. No one corrected her, no one defended Marable. That silence emboldened Zyra. She mistook control for permission. Marable studied her the way one studies a problem already solved, patiently, without urgency. The kind of look that doesn't rush because it knows the ending. Behind Zyra, one of the men quietly shifted his stance, creating distance without making it obvious. Zyra didn't notice. She was too busy preparing the next sentence, the one she would never be able to take back. Zyra didn't stop herself. She tilted her head, smiled thinly, and let her words sharpen. "You really live like this," she said, gesturing around the room. "Quiet, empty, no wonder he looks for something else." Julius stood near the stairs, frozen. His silence felt like permission. Zyra stepped closer to Marable, close enough to invade space, close enough to make it personal. "You don't even fight for him," she said. "That's the saddest part. Women like you think being calm makes you strong. It just makes you forgettable." A few men shifted. One looked down. Another turned slightly away, as if he didn't want to be seen witnessing what was coming. Zyra noticed none of it. She laughed again, louder this time. "I had warnings, you know, letters, messengers. You sent other women to do your talking. Is that all you can manage?" Marable didn't flinch. Her face remained composed, almost gentle. She didn't defend herself. She didn't explain. She didn't ask Zyra to leave. She simply allowed the words to land and pass through her as if insults were the weather. Zyra mistook that stillness for defeat. "You should thank me," she continued. "At least now you know the truth. He chose me. And you," she paused, eyes narrowing, "you were never a threat." That was when Marable finally spoke. Not loudly, not sharply. "Julius," she said, without looking away from Zyra, "you may go upstairs." Julius hesitated, then obeyed. The room shifted. Zyra felt it then, a subtle change, the air tightening. The way the men's attention moved, not toward her, but away from her, like distance itself was a warning. Marable took one slow step forward. And for the first time, Zyra realized she might have crossed a line she hadn't seen. Marable stopped an arm's length, away from Zyra. Up close there was nothing dramatic about her, no anger in her eyes, no tremor in her voice. That absence was what made it unbearable. "I knew about you before the letter was written," Marable said calmly. Zyra's smile faltered, just slightly. "I knew before I spoke to my husband," Marable continued, "before he denied it, before he shouted, before he decided silence meant weakness." The words landed without force, but they landed exactly where they were meant to. Zyra scoffed, trying to recover. "Then why all the theatrics?" she snapped. "Why the warnings?" Marable tilted her head, almost curious. "Those weren't theatrics," she said. "They were opportunities." The room remained still. No one interrupted. No one moved. "You were warned twice," Marable went on. "Once with privacy, once with respect. You refused both." Zyra's pulse quickened. She felt it now, the weight behind the calm, the certainty behind the softness. She glanced around, searching for Julius. He was gone. "You think you scare me," Zyra said. Voice sharper than she intended. "You don't know who my father is." Marable nodded once. "I do." That answer changed everything. She stepped back, giving Zyra space instead of taking it away. A deliberate choice, mercy already spent. "Nothing will happen tonight," Marable said. "You'll leave, you'll go home." Zyra exhaled, relief flashing across her face. Marable held her gaze. "But everything you brought into this house," she added, "stays with you when you go." Zyra didn't understand yet. She would. Nothing happened the night Zyra left the house. That was what confused her most. The gate opened, she drove away untouched. No confrontation, no police, no men followed her car. By the time she reached her apartment, her confidence had started to rebuild itself, fragile but persistent. She told herself she had imagined the tension, told herself the wife had been bluffing. The next morning, the first door closed. A scheduled meeting was postponed, no explanation, no reschedule. By noon, a contract she had been negotiating for months was suddenly under review. An invitation she expected never arrived. Each incident was small enough to dismiss. Together, they felt like something was tightening. Zaira called contacts who normally answered on the first ring. Calls went to voicemail. Messages were left on read. A friend who once boasted about knowing her father suddenly became distant, polite in a way that felt rehearsed. By evening, her name had begun to shift in rooms she wasn't in. Nothing defamatory, nothing actionable, just quiet repositioning. She was described as unstable, complicated, a risk, words that didn't accuse but warned. Zaira felt watched without seeing anyone, not followed, not threatened, simply excluded. She called Julius repeatedly. He didn't answer. Across the city, Marable signed off on routine matters, attended to her daughter, and went to bed at her usual time. No instructions were given that night. They didn't need to be. The machine had already been set in motion. Zaira would spend days trying to fight shadows, never realizing that what was happening wasn't punishment. It was removal, and it had only just begun. 3 weeks later, Zaira received a call she didn't expect, and one she couldn't undo. She was being placed on indefinite personal leave. No accusations, no charges, just a quiet recommendation she would never be rehired in that sector again. By nightfall, she understood something that terrified her more than threats ever could. There was no appeal process for this kind of erasure. Julius Holt didn't understand what was happening until it was already irreversible. It began with money, accounts delayed, transfers questioned, approvals suddenly requiring more signatures than before. People he had relied on for years started responding slowly, cautiously, as if every word now carried risk. When he confronted Marable, she didn't argue, she didn't deny anything. She listened, the same way she always had. "You embarrassed me," he said, voice tight. "You made me look weak." Marable met his eyes for a moment, long enough to let him see something he had never looked for. "You did that yourself," she said. That was the last conversation they had as equals. Within weeks, Julius's access diminished. He was not arrested, he was not threatened, he simply became irrelevant. Invitations stopped, deals bypassed him, men who once deferred now spoke around him instead of to him. He tried to reach Zaira. When she finally answered, her voice sounded distant, frayed. She accused him of lying, of ruining her, of disappearing when she needed him most. Julius had no defense left. He realized then what Marable had taken from him, not his freedom, not his life, but his position, the illusion that he mattered. That night, Julius asked Marable for help, for access, for a call for intervention. She listened and said nothing. Marable continued her routine, school runs, meetings, silence. Julius remained in the house, alive and present, but stripped of authority. He had underestimated her twice, once in rage, once in confidence. Now he lived with the cost of both. And there was no warning left to be given. People often imagined power as noise. Raised voices, public fear, displays meant to be witnessed. Marable's power was none of those things. It existed in absence, in the way situations resolved themselves before becoming visible. The men around Marable were not employees, loyalties held because they had been tested years earlier, quietly, thoroughly. They were custodians of favors owed, debts that stretched back decades across ports, borders, and families. No one announced her role, no one raised a weapon for her, they didn't need to. Her name was enough. Zaira's world continued to narrow. Not dramatically, methodically. Institutions distanced themselves. Associations became liabilities. Her father pushed where he could, only to encounter polite resistance, regulations, concerns, procedures that couldn't be argued with. He began to understand then what kind of woman his daughter had crossed. He didn't call Marable, he knew better. Julius watched all of this from the same house he once ruled. He saw how people still deferred to Marable, never to him. How conversations paused when she entered rooms. How problems dissolved without explanation. He had lived beside power and never recognized it. Marable paid the cost quietly. Her marriage became a formality, trust was gone. The house felt larger now, emptier. She shielded her daughter from everything, preserving innocence at the expense of her own peace. Power kept order. It did not bring comfort. And as Zara fought a battle she could never name, Marable remained exactly where she had always been, untouched, uncelebrated, and fully aware that restraint, once broken, could never be restored. The silence returned. Permanent this time. Zara Vale didn't disappear. That was the cruelest part. She was still seen at events, just not centered in them, still invited, just not introduced. Her name remained intact on paper, but its weight was gone. People smiled at her now the way they smiled at liabilities, carefully, briefly, from a distance. Her father stopped pushing, not because he stopped caring, but because he finally understood the boundary he had brushed against. Whatever forces were at work did not respond to pressure. They responded to restraint, and he had none left to spend. Zara blamed Julius, then herself, then everyone. Julius remained in the house, reduced to routine. He no longer raised his voice, no longer made declarations. The man who once shouted about being the head of the house now measured his words like someone renting space he no longer owned. Marable never confronted either of them again. She didn't need to. Order had been restored, not through fear, but through correction. Everyone involved now understood where they stood, even if they didn't fully understand why. One evening, Marable stood in the living room alone, the same room where Zara's voice had once echoed with disrespect. The furniture hadn't moved, the walls hadn't changed, only the balance had. She adjusted a picture frame, turned off a light, and walked upstairs. The house returned to quiet. Not the fragile kind. The final kind. Marable K. Holt kept everything she had fought to protect. Her daughter remained untouched by scandal. Her name remained clean. Her authority remained intact. From the outside, nothing had changed. Inside, everything had. Her marriage was hollow now, functional, silent, stripped of illusion. Julius lived beside her like a reminder of a lesson learned too late. Zara lived with consequences she could never explain publicly, only feel privately. No one celebrated Marable's restraint. No one thanked her for mercy. That was the price. Power, when used carefully, leaves no evidence. Only absence. Only silence. And only those who crossed it ever truly know it was there. Before you go, was Marable too patient or too merciful? And who deserved the consequences more? The woman who ignored every warning, or the man who convinced her she was safe? Let me know your thoughts below.